Perfect. Okay. So welcome to Meal Prep Hacks, today's online wellness class. I think I've met most of you, but for those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Samantha, the wellness coordinator for Atlas, and I'm also a registered dietitian. So a little bit about what we'll be talking about today. For starters, kind of getting back to the basics of how to plan meals and how to piece them together into menus. So we'll go over, what to look for in a meal and how to kind of create those, and then tips for actually planning your menu. And then the second part will be about the meal prep itself, looking at some tips, some different kinds of meal prep, some different ways you can use it, and then leaving any time for questions at the end. So we'll start out talking about meal planning and putting them into a menu, which are, really the foundation of meal prep is how you plan it. Because even if you have like super efficient flow and you're really good at, the prep component, if you didn't plan it well, it's just going to waste a lot of time and effort. So it's always good to put a lot of effort into the planning process. So when I think about planning meals, what I usually teach people is that we want to find balance in our meals. And what I mean by balance are we have these different nutrients or macronutrients, you may have heard them called, and they all work together. They have these different jobs. And when we eat the macronutrients in balance, so in the right amounts and the right types of foods, they can work together in our body to kind of, really optimally help us be healthy and full and energized. So it's all about, are we putting each of these components in our meal and how much are we giving to each type here? So just running through it, the first kind of macronutrient is protein. Protein gives us energy, it helps our body run. Specifically, protein has all these like little building blocks in it that we call amino acids. And they all kind of work together to help us grow and make hormones and make different chemicals in the body. Really just everything relies on these proteins to kind of help things run. So that's why we want those in our meals. Our second piece, carbs. And I know that carbs have a really bad rep lately. So I actually like to call them energy foods because I think it's a little more friendly because we do need carbs. They are essential. So mainly what we use them for is energy, like I said. They're actually the preferred energy source of the brain and the muscles and the organs, so much to the point that if we don't eat carbs, our body will literally turn other things in its structures and its muscles and whatnot. It'll turn those into sugars because it needs them so badly. So do yourself a favor, put a carb at your meals. It doesn't have to be a ton, just, that it's there at all. The other thing we need carbs for is fiber. Fiber is actually a special type of carb, and it helps with digestion and gut health, keeping you regular, can also help lower cholesterol. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, the third macronutrient that we want to put in our meals are fats. So fats keep us full. That's what the word satiety means. They have actually the most calories per gram. So they're the most dense of the macronutrients. So really great to kind of fill out your meals. And they also have some special functions, like they help us grow. They help us make, those little tiny cells in our body, help us make hormones, help absorb certain nutrients. We have to have fats for those. And also if we eat a lot of heart healthy fats, like the ones shown in this picture, it can be good for our heart, can help it work better. So this is where I kind of have a laundry list of a bunch of different items you can pick and choose and pull into your menus. Usually this is a pretty good starting place for folks when they're planning meals, is kind of, working through this process one nutrient at a time, piecing it into a meal. So usually protein is the easiest place to start to kind of focus your meal around, because oftentimes, here in this country, we're really focused on our protein sources. So, here are a few different places you can get that from. Both animal foods, seafoods, dairy is a protein too. We have eggs, and then plant-based proteins are often overlooked, but can be a really great addition for some variety and some extra nutrients. So we have a few different soy options listed here, and then also some legumes, which are things like beans and lentils, peanuts, that kind of a thing. So, you know, including the protein at your meals is important, and varying the protein as much as you can is also important. So again, you'll have these, the list here too, to play with on your own. Here's my carb list. So ideally when we're picking carbs, we're doing ones that are fiber-based. Where we get fiber are things like whole grains. So we have this whole category here of those. And we also get them from fruits and veggies. So I didn't put fruits on here because there's another slide for that, but you can also get fiber out of these starchy veggies. If they have, you know, skin on them, that's usually fiber. And then there are also, of course, other carbs that may or may not be fiber-based, but we can still, of course, include and usually work pretty well in meals. So pick one protein first, then we're going to pick one carb, and then we'll add the fat. So a few different options here. We have oils, a lot of different ones here. My kind of rule of thumb for oils is if it is solid at room temperature, it's not great for our heart, but if it's liquid at room temperature, then it does have heart-healthy oils in it. So just kind of something to keep in mind when you're thinking about, you know, choosing what you're going to cook with. Nuts and seeds have a lot of great fats in them. Avocado is a classic heart-healthy fat. Dressings, spreads, dairy can have fat in it too, and then also eggs. Okay. And then now for my favorite category, the fruits and veggies. So tons of different options here. Again, just a laundry list for you to kind of play with when you're like individually pulling things to put in meals. I always recommend you include at least one fruit or veggie in every meal because it makes it easier to hit the daily goals. So get a lot of good fiber, get a lot of good nutrients, and they also can just taste good too. So to kind of recap, first, we're picking our protein source, then we're picking a carb, then we're picking a fat, and then where are we adding in a fruit or a veggie? Okay. Another way to kind of look at this, if you want to think more on the side of portions, because that matters too, you know, we want to have all the foods there to have all those kind of building blocks, but if we eat them in certain amounts, then they work better together. So for example, rather than having like a plate that's super carb heavy, which is going to cause a lot of sugar to kind of go into your blood and might not feel great for you, if we balance it out by putting other things with it in kind of this optimal proportion, it's better for kind of that long-term health and also just keeping you feeling good throughout the day. So this plate here is, it's a method called the plate method. It was actually developed kind of as a spin-off to that like classic government, you know, My Plate that you guys may have seen. It's a little bit different though. They took this and kind of applied it to a chronic disease prevention and management standpoint, specifically with a lot of research on diabetes. So these were kind of found to be like the optimal proportions to maintain health and prevent illness. So pretty cool. Sorry, does someone have a question? Never mind, just getting some feedback. So you'll see a quarter of the plate is a protein source, a quarter of it is a carb. And that's because the carbs give us the energy and the protein makes it last. So if you think about it, if you just eat like a ton of, you know, fruit or bread or whatever, it's going to turn into blood sugar really quickly and it's not going to feel great. It's not going to feel good. Protein kind of like gloms onto it. It makes it a little slower of a release. So kind of like a balanced 1-to-1 ratio here. Then the other half of our plate is where we put in the fruits and veggies. So to get more of those nutrients and to help with the fiber and all of that great stuff. And then not listed on the plate, but still important, are those fats. So I kind of think of them as more of an add-on rather than making it like your main focus. Just kind of like, you know, whether it's a salad dressing or you're putting a sauce or you're having, you know, cheese, like it's not usually the main feature of your meal, but it's there in some capacity. I have a few examples too of, you know, just this plate method that you can use in different ways. You know, we've got salads are a pretty easy way to get in the veggies, you know, putting a protein. This is a little more classic of a, you know, division like what we saw, but you can also, you know, kind of go a little off of the picture, like a salad, for example. and you're just kind of sprinkling on these extra components. My little thing is blocking this one. Pizza, that's one of my favorite ones to talk about, because you've got the carb here in your crust, you've got the protein and the fats in your cheese, and you've got a bunch of veggies in a side salad and also on top. Make this, there we go. Okay. Yeah, anyone have any questions on meal planning itself? Oh, I have tips too. Guess I should share those. Okay, so when it comes to meal planning, my biggest advice is to pick a day. Designate a day that you're gonna do the planning, that you're gonna do the shopping, and that you're gonna do the prepping. Because if you try to just like wing it, it takes a lot of energy and you'll burn out, and that's not what we want. So usually it works best if you kind of split them, you know, whatever's going to work for your schedule, but on separate days, but just making sure that you have a plan where you're really dedicating time to do it right. Starting small is really important. So planning a whole, you know, 7-day menu with 3 meals is really overwhelming. It's a lot of food. So I always recommend people start small, whether it's just picking like, you know, 1 meal, like maybe you just want to do 3 lunches throughout the week, you know, and work your way up, adding 1 lunch each week until you're, you know, able to add dinners. Doing something that's feasible so you don't, again, burn out and overwhelm yourself. Another tip, make it kind of fun by adding occasions in. It kind of helps with planning because it takes out like one decision. Like you don't have to think about it. Every Monday I do like a tofu dish or something, you know, or Taco Tuesdays are another popular one, and it kind of just makes it more fun throughout your week. Strategize and automate. So being realistic with your planning, thinking about, you know, how is my week going to look? Maybe you have a really busy, you know, end of the week. And so that might be a great time to really leverage frozen meals or meals that don't have a lot of prep involved, like, you know, things that come from bagged salads or from like pre-made stir-fry veggies, like something that's going to be feasible for your schedule. And then overlapping menu items, it kind of goes along with this too, like kind of repurposing different meals. So maybe something you cook for dinner you can then use for lunch, like a leftover kind of thing. Or maybe you're planning meals that have components that can be pulled and put into different meals altogether. Like tacos are a classic example. You have taco meat in your taco at dinner. You take out the meat and you can put it in a scramble for breakfast. You have the separate meat again and you can have a taco salad. There are 3 totally different meals. So it feels like you're getting more variety, but you're only actually having to like plan and cook for that taco meat, right? Also good to do with things like sauces, like marinara sauce. You can do spaghetti, pizza, you could do sandwiches. You could also do like stir-fry veggies. Those are pretty versatile, like going from a classic stir-fry to maybe like a noodle salad to, you know, putting the stir-fry veggies in an omelet. Just getting creative with kind of coming up with those overlapping items will save you a lot of time. And then my final tip is, of course, to be realistic. Again, meal planning is really hard. It's hard to get into, and it's really habit and routine. So don't set the bar too high and set yourself up for failure. It's better to be honest and do something that you're capable and willing to do. And also being realistic with like what you actually will eat and enjoy. Like you can plan out a whole week of salads, and if you don't like salads, I mean, that's not going to do you any good, right? So, you know, factoring in that, yes, nutrition is important, but we need to be realistic with what we're actually going to eat and enjoy too. Okay, anyone have anything they want to share on meal planning before we move on to the prep piece? I realized my chat box isn't up, so hopefully no one's put anything in there. Okay, we're good. So let's talk about meal prep, why you're all here. So kind of just like a little recap, I guess, of the different types of meal prep. I kind of like to think of it as this continuum. You know, we can go anywhere from daily to monthly, and it's really a matter of what are you willing to commit and how much time do you have? Yeah, good tip, Mary. Just reading your comment here. So Mary plans meals that can double for lunch the next day. Again, repurposing, reusing the menu, super awesome strategy. So I kind of want to just run through the different types because I think sometimes people think of meal prep as this like stereotypical, like I'm going to lay out all my cute little Tupperwares and cut everything up and put them in the containers and like that's meal prep. But really it can be anything, you know, even just like a daily part of your routine, or it can be more of like a once a month thing. So day of prep, it's usually, you know, classic cooking, and you can bring the leftovers to for lunch or whatever, like that would all be considered day of. You're making something and you're eating it that day. The benefits, you have a fresh warm meal, which is enjoyable and works better for some foods rather than others. And it's also, you know, you can do it all at once. You don't have to worry about adding in like the finishing touches, you know, at a later time because you couldn't get to it. Like it's one and done. The cons being though, it's pretty inefficient from a meal prep standpoint because you're having to like every night cook something different, get out the cutting board, you know, cut the produce, do the dishes, like rather than automating it all at once. So weekly meal prep, I think, is the most popular form that I see, at least, where you kind of make your meals for the week, you prepare them for the week. The nice thing is you get kind of this mix of, you know, some days you'll have fresh meals that were just made. The other days it'll be semi-fresh, you know, still good. They're not frozen. You don't have to worry about the storage as much. The other kind of pro here is that it's a little bit more efficient than the day of prep. Like you're able to just kind of one and done, get everything out, get everything cooked, get everything cleaned. The con being though, of course, it takes time. It's usually people will designate like a day to do it, part of a day. It's just extra time that you are, you know, missing out on enjoying your weekend or whatever. Bi-weekly meal prep is kind of like a combination of, you know, getting fresh meals the week of and then freezing others. What's nice about it is it still has that time commitment, but proportionally, it's not like as much as if you were to do 2 separate weeks of prep. If you're just doing one day of bigger prep, and then you don't have to think about it at all for 2 weeks. So just twice a month, then you're doing this like bigger, more extensive one, which does take time, but it is kind of nice for those who don't like to plan and you know, do this on the weekend. And then finally, monthly meal prep. So this one works best for freezing because food can't stay good in our fridge for a month, obviously, food safety reasons. So usually where I see this done is people will make up like a bunch of like staple meals, like, you know, burritos that they can freeze, or like breakfast sandwiches, or, you know, pizza sauce, spaghetti sauce, soup, that kind of stuff that freezes really well. Or fruits and veggies, like go to the store, go to Costco or whatever, you buy a big old pack of, I mean, anything, because everything there is huge, and you just chop it all up and put it in your freezer. So usually this isn't a standalone meal prep. It's kind of like to supplement throughout the month to make, you know, certain tasks quicker throughout the month. Like instead of having to cut veggies every single week, you're only cutting veggies once a month. Sorry, I got another chat. How long can you keep frozen veggies that are prepared? Great question, Tina. Generally, you can keep them for a few months. Usually 4 or 5 months is kind of the rule of thumb. It kind of depends on your freezer. Honestly, you have to worry about freezer burn more so than food safety. I mean, like those big bags of like Costco things, those can even stay good for like half a year. So I wouldn't worry too much about the food perishing in the freezer. But if you are, you know, doing that, it's a pretty good option. Oh, that is so cool. Sandy said, if you have a food saver, they last for a year or more, which is awesome. Like think of the monthly prep you could do there, or bi-monthly prep, whatever. These are great comments, you guys. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the process itself. So again, it comes back to this like planning piece. The first step you have to do is plan your prep. If you just dive into it, you might run into hiccups, you might waste time. In the long run, it's better to just think about how you're going to do it. So for example, are you going to cook recipe by recipe? Well, I guess it's kind of going to the second one. Plan your prep means more like, are you going to do it all in one day, or are you going to spread it out over multiple days? So for example, some weekends, like I know I'll be really busy. So maybe on Saturday, I'll cut up my veggies so that on Sunday, all I have to do is cook them. Or, you know, maybe I'll just make a big pot of rice and use it through the week rather than doing it by individual meals. Strategize and streamline is another, you know, way to plan it. So are you going to cook recipe by recipe? Are you going to group together like steps? I'm always, you know, I think when you're starting out, it's easier to do recipe by recipe because you just focus on it. You can, you know, get used to it and get the hang of it. But once you're able to kind of multitask better and, you know, think about multiple components at once, grouping together those like steps is much more efficient. You know, gathering all of the carrots that you're going to cut for the day and cut that out rather than having to, like, you know, break it up throughout the day. It saves time on cooking, on prepping, on doing dishes. It's just good if you can get to that point. And then also thinking about the cooking method. So like if you know that you're going to be using the Instapot for like a pressure cooker recipe and a slow cooker recipe, it would make the most sense to do the pressure cooker one first so that you're not, so then you can have it done with and start your slow cooker rather than having to wait on the slow cooker for like 6 hours before you can come back to do the other one. Or maybe that makes more sense for your day. I mean, it depends on your planning and what your schedule looks like, but just being mindful of those cooking methods. And then you can start. So we have a couple minutes left here, so I'll end on my final slide, which is some kind of considerations and tips for the actual prep process. I think a lot of you were in my grocery hacks class where you learned that I'm a huge fan of frozen and canned and pre-prepared produce because it is a huge time saver. No significant nutritional difference. Honestly, the stress you save, I think, is worth it in any terms of health. So always go to those if you are finding yourself struggling with the fresh prep. Storage, I always recommend people, instead of like putting it into like a giant Tupperware, like actually put it in Tupperware as appropriate to the portions you plan to eat. Because it helps you ensure that you're actually going to have enough for the week. You're not like eating it all on Monday and then you don't have enough on Wednesday kind of a thing. And it also is like grab and go easy. Like I'm out the door. I need to just grab my lunch. It's already there. You don't have to think about it. Freezing too works great for things like, that are kind of liquidy, like soups or sauces, even solid things too. I mean, I think I mentioned like burritos, sandwiches, like those are all really popular freezer items that are great. And always labeling with dates. Food safety is important. So don't just like set something in your fridge for you to forget about and eat 2 weeks later, because that's probably not safe. We already kind of touched on cooking methods, but thinking about how you can adapt the recipe to work with other recipes simultaneously. Like, for example, if you're using the oven and you have something that needs to cook at a certain temperature and something that needs to cook at another, how can you kind of like compromise between the two? Like maybe find a middle ground and kind of adjust the timing from there, because then you're only having to use the oven once rather than like wait for 20 minutes on this one and then wait for 30 on that. Streamlining it that way can be nice. Kitchen tools, like Mary shared her food saver. That's a super awesome kitchen tool I hadn't thought of, but over here too, you could do things like, slicers and mandolins, or like they make all sorts of specialty tools now for like onions and avocados and kale. Like, don't think that's necessary, but if that's your barrier and you enjoy and it's kind of more fun, like get creative with those kitchen tools. Can save you time that builds up. And then finally, a lot of recipes do need some extent of day of prep for those like final touches, whether it's like garnishes or sauces that are a little bit more perishable. So I always recommend when you're doing your big day of prep to put like a sticky note on your container that says what needs to be done day of, so that A, you don't forget about it, and B, you don't have to like take up that mental space again to plan it again. It's just more like, nope, on Tuesday, I just make the sauce, or on Wednesday, I'm just going to put lime juice and then I'm going to eat it. Something like that. Okay. And with that, I will